The Death of Bed Number 12 by Ghassan Kanafani, written in 1961. Dear Ahmed, I have chosen you in particular to be the recipient of this letter for a reason, which may appear to you commonplace. Yet, since yesterday my every thought has been centered on it. I chose you in particular because when I saw him yesterday, dying on the high white bed, I remembered how you used to use the word die to express anything extreme. Many is the time I've heard you use such expressions as, I almost died laughing, I was dead tired, death itself couldn't quench my love, and so on. While it is true that we all use such words, you use them more than anybody. Thus it was that I remembered you as I saw him sinking down in the bed, and clutching at the coverlet with his long, emaciated fingers, giving a convulsive shiver, and then staring out at me with dead eyes. But why have I not begun at the beginning? You know, no doubt, that I am now in my second month at the hospital. I have been suffering from a stomach ulcer, but no sooner had the surgeon plugged up the hole in my stomach than a new one appeared in my head, about which the surgeon could do nothing. Believe me, Ahmed, that an ulcer on the brain is a lot more stubborn than one in the stomach. My room leads on to the main corridor of the internal diseases wing, while the window overlooks the small hospital garden. Thus, propped up by a pillow, I can observe both the continuous flow of patients passing the door, as well as the birds, which fly past the window incessantly. Amidst this hubbub of people who come here to die in the serene shadow of the scalpel, and whom I see, having arrived on their own 2 feet, leaving after days or hours on the death trolley, wrapped around in a covering of white. In this hubbub, I find myself quite unable to make good those holes that have begun to open up in my head, quite incapable of stopping the flow of questions that mercilessly demand an answer of me. I shall be leaving the hospital in a few days, for they have patched up my insides as best as they can. I am now able to walk, leaning on the arm of an old and ugly nurse, and on my own powers of resistance. The hospital, however, has done little more than transfer the ulcer from my stomach to my head. For in this place, as the ugly old woman remarked, medicine may be able to plug up a hole in the stomach, but it can never find the answers required to plug up holes in one's thinking. The day she said this, the old woman gave a toothless laugh as she quietly led me off to the scales. What, though, has such talk to do with us? What I want to talk to you about is death. Death that takes place in front of you, not about that death of which one merely hears. The difference between the 2 types of death is immeasurable, and cannot be appreciated by someone who has not been a witness to a human being clutching at the coverlet of his bed with all the strength of his trembling fingers, in order to resist that terrible slipping into extinction, as though this coverlet can pull him back from that colossus who, little by little, wrests from his eyes this life about which we know scarcely anything. As the doctors waited around him, I examined the card that hung at the foot of his bed. I had slipped out of my room and was standing there, unseen by the doctors, who were engaged in a hopeless attempt to save the dying man. I read, name, Muhammad Ali Akbar, age, 25, nationality, Ommani. I turned the card over and this time read, leukemia. Again I stared into the thin brown face, the wide frightened eyes, and the lips that trembled like a ripple of purple water. As his eyes turned and came to rest on my face, it seemed that he was appealing to me for help. Why? Because I used to give him a casual greeting every morning? Or was it that he saw in my face understanding of the terror he was undergoing? He went on staring at me, and then, quite simply, he died. It was only then that the doctor discovered me and dragged me off angrily to my room. But he would never be able to banish from my mind the scene that is ever present there. As I got into my bed, I heard the voice of the male nurse in the corridor alongside my door, saying in a matter-of-fact voice, "Bed number 12 has died." I said to myself, Muhammad Ali Akbar has lost his name. He is bed number 12. What do I mean now when I talk of a human being whose name was Muhammad Ali Akbar? What does it matter to him whether he still retains his name or whether it is replaced by a number? Then I remembered how he wouldn't allow anyone to omit any part of his name. Every morning the nurse would ask him, "And how are you, Muhammad Ali?" And he would not reply, for he regarded his name as being Muhammad Ali Akbar, just like that, all in one, and that this Muhammad Ali to whom the nurse was speaking was some other person. Though the nurses found a subject for mirth in this insistence on his whole name being used, Muhammad Ali Akbar continued to demand it. Perhaps he regarded his right to possessing his name in full as being an insistence that he at least owned something, for he was poor, extremely poor, a great deal more so than you with your fertile imagination could conceive as you lounge around in the cafe. Poverty was something engraved in his face, his forearms, his chest, the way he ate, into everything that surrounded him. When I was able to walk for the first time after they had patched me up, I paid him a visit. The back of his bed was raised and he was sitting up, lost in thought. I sat on the side of the bed for a short while, and we exchanged a few brief, banal words. I noticed that alongside his pillow was an old wooden box, with his name carved on it in a semi-Persian style writing. It was securely tied with twine. Apart from this, he owned nothing, except his clothes, which were kept in the hospital cupboard. I remembered that on that day I had asked the nurse, "What's in the old box?" "No one knows," she answered, laughing. "He refuses to be parted from the box for a single instant." Then she bent over and whispered, "These people who look so poor are generally hiding some treasure or other. Perhaps this is his." During my stay, no one visited him at the hospital. As he knew no one, I used to send him some of the sweets with which my visitors inundated me. He accepted everything without enthusiasm. He was not good at expressing gratitude, and his behavior over this caused a certain fleeting resentment in me. I did not concern myself with the mysterious box. Though Muhammad Ali Akbar's condition steadily worsened, his attitude towards the box did not change, which caused the nurse to remark to me that if there had been some treasure in it, he would surely have given it away, or willed it to someone, seeing that he was heading for death at such speed. Like some petty philosopher, I had laughed that day, saying to myself that the stupidity of this nurse scarcely knew any bounds, that he was inevitably dying, that there was not a hope of his pulling through. His insistence on keeping the box was tantamount in hanging on to his hope of pulling through and being reunited with his box. When Muhammad Ali Akbar died, I saw the box at his side, where it had always been, and it occurred to me that the box ought to be buried unopened with him. On going to my room that night, I was quite unable to sleep. While Muhammad Ali Akbar had been deposited in this autopsy room, wrapped up in a white covering, he was at the same time sitting in my room and staring at me, passing through the hospital wards and searing about in his bed. I could almost hear the way he would gasp for breath before going to sleep. When day dawned across the trees of the hospital garden, I had created a complete story about him for myself. Muhammad Ali Akbar was a poor man from the western quarter of the village Abkha in Oman. A thin, dark-skinned young man with aspirations burning in his eyes that could find no release. True, he was poor, but what does poverty mean to a man if he has never known anything else? The whole of Abkha suffered from being poor, a poverty identical to Muhammad Ali Akbar's. It was, however, a contented poverty, a poverty that was deep-seated and devoid of anything that prompted one to feel that it was wrong and that there was something else called riches. And so it was that the 2 water skins Muhammad Ali Akbar carried across his shoulders as he knocked on people's doors to sell them water were the 2 scales which set the balance of his daily round. Muhammad Ali Akbar was aware of a certain dizziness when he laid down the water skins, but when taking them up again the next morning, he would feel that his existence was progressing tranquility, and that he had ensured for himself a balanced, undeviating journey through life. Muhammad Ali Akbar's life could have continued in this quiet and ordered fashion had fate emulated civilization in not reaching faraway Amman. But fate was present even in far-off Amman, and it was inevitable that Muhammad Ali Akbar should suffer a little from its capricious ways. It happened on a scorchingly hot morning. Though the sun was not yet at the meridian, the suitcase of the road was hot, and the desert blew gusts of dust-laden wind into his face. He knocked at a door, which was answered by a young, brown-skinned girl with wide black eyes, and everything happened with the utmost speed. Like some clumsy oaf who has lost his way, he stood in front of the door, the waterskins swinging to and fro on his lean shoulders. Abstractly, he stared at her, hoping, like someone overcome with a mild attack of sunstroke, that his eyes would miraculously be capable of clasping her to him. She stared back, in sheer astonishment, and unable to utter a word, he turned his back on her and went off home with his waterskins. Though Muhammad Ali Akbar was exceptionally shy, even with his own family, he found himself forced to pour out his heart to his elder sister. As his mother had died of smallpox a long time ago, and his father was helplessly bedridden, it was to his sister that he turned to for help, for he had unswerving confidence that Sabia possessed the necessary intelligence and judgment for solving a problem of this sort. Seated before him on the rush mat, shrouded in her coarse black dress, she did not break her silence till Muhammad Ali Akbar had gasped out the last of his story. "I shall seek her hand in marriage," she then said. "Isn't that what you want?" Yes, is it possible?" Removing a straw from the old rush mat, his sister replied, "Why not? You are now a young man, and we are all equal in Abkha." Muhammad Ali Akbar spent a most disturbed night. When morning came, he found that his sister was even more eager than himself to set off on her mission. They agreed to meet up at noon, when she would tell him of the results of her effort, and from there they would both make the necessary arrangements for bringing the matter to completion. Muhammad Ali Akbar did not know how to pass the time, wandering through the lanes with the water skins on his shoulders. He kept looking at his shadow and beseeching God to make it into a circle round his feet so that he might hurry back home. After what seemed an eternity, he made his way back, and he was met at the door by his sister. "It seems that her mother is agreeable, but it all must be put to her father, who will give his answer in 5 days." Deep down within him, Muhammad Ali Akbar felt that he was going to be successful in making the girl his wife. As far as he was able to imagine, he began from henceforth to build up images of his future with this young and beautiful brown-skinned girl. His sister Sabia looked at the matter with a wise and experienced eye, but she too was sure that they would be successful, for she was convinced that her brother's name was without blemish among the people of Abkha. She had, in addition, given a lot of attention to gaining the approval of the girl's mother, knowing as she did how a woman was able to put an idea to her husband and make him believe that it was his own. Sabia, therefore, awaited the outcome of the matter with complete composure. On the 5th day, Sabia went to the girl's house in order to receive the answer. When she returned, however, her discontented face showed that she had failed. She stood in a corner of the room, unable to look Muhammad Ali Akbar in the eye, not knowing how to begin recounting what had happened. "You must forget her, Muhammad Ali," she said when she had managed to pluck up her courage. Not knowing what to say, he waited for her sister to finish. "Her father died 2 days ago," continued Sabia, finding an opportunity in his silence to continue. "His dying wish to his family was that they should not give her to you in marriage." Muhammad Ali Akbar heard these words as though they were addressed to someone else. "But why, Sabia, why?" was all he could ask. "He was told that you were a scoundrel, that you lived by stealing sheep on the mountain road, trading what you steal with the foreigners." "I?" "They think you are Muhammad Ali," said Sabia in a trembling voice she was unable to control. "You know, the scoundrel Muhammad Ali. Her father thought that you were he." "But I am not Muhammad Ali," he replied, palms outstretched like a child excusing himself for some misdeed he has not committed. "I'm Muhammad Ali Akbar." "There's been some mistake. I told them at the beginning that your name was Muhammad Ali. I don't say Muhammad Ali Akbar because I saw no necessity for doing so." Muhammad Ali Akbar felt his chest being crushed under the weight of the blow. However, he remained standing where he was, staring at his sister Sabia without fully seeing her. Blinded by anger, he let fly a final arrow. "Did you tell her mother that I am not Muhammad Ali, but Muhammad Ali Akbar?" "Yes, but the father's last wish was that they shouldn't marry her to you." "But I'm Muhammad Ali Akbar, the water seller, aren't I?" What was the use, though, of being so stricken? Everything had quite simply come to an end. A single word had lodged itself into the gullet of his romance, and it had died. Muhammad Ali Akbar, however, was unable to forget the girl so easily, and spent his time roaming about near her house in the hope of seeing her once again. Why? He did not know. His failure brought in its wake a savage anger, which turned to hate. Soon he was no longer able to pass along the road, for fear that his fury would overcome him, and he would pelt the window of her house with stones. From that day onwards, he refused to be called by anything but his name in full, Muhammad Ali Akbar, all in one. He refused to answer to anyone who would call him Muhammad or Muhammad Ali, and this soon became a habit with him. Even his sister Sabia did not dare to use a contracted form of his name. No longer did he experience his former contentment, and Abkha gradually changed to a forbidding graveyard in his eyes. Refusing to give in to his sister's insistence that he would marry, a worm called wealth began to eat his way into his brain. He wanted to take revenge on everything, to marry a woman with whom he could challenge the whole of Abkha, all those who did not believe that he was Muhammad Ali Akbar, but Muhammad Ali the scoundrel. Where, though, to find wealth? Thus he decided to sail away to Kuwait. The distance between Abkha and Ras Al Khaimah is 2 hours by foot, and from Ras Al Khaimah to Kuwait by sea is a journey of 3 days, the fare for which on an antiquated boat was 70 rupees. After a year or two, he would be able to return to Oman and strut about proudly in the alleyways of Abkha, wearing a snow-white abaya trimmed with gold, like the one he had seen round the shoulders of a notable from Ras Al Khaimah who had come to his village to take the hand of a girl the fame of whose beauty had reached all the way there. The journey was a hard one. the boat which took the eager throng across the south and then made its way northwards to the corner of the Gulf, was continuously exposed to a variety of dangers. But ebullient souls accustomed to life's hardship paid no heed to such matters. All hands cooperated in the task of delivering safely that small boat floating on the waves of the great sea. And while the sails of the ship laying in Kuwait's quiet harbor came into view, Muhammad Ali Akbar experienced a strange feeling. The dream had now fallen from the colored world of fantasy into the realm of reality, and he had to search around for a starting point, for a beginning to his dream. It seemed to him that the fantasies nourished by his hate for Abqa, and for which he now sought vengeance, were not of sufficient moment. As the frail craft approached, threading its way among the anchored boats, he was slowly drained of his feeling, and it appeared to him that his long dreams of wealth were merely a solace for his sudden failure, and that they were quite irrational. The packed streets, the buildings with the massive walls, the grey sky, the scorching heat, the warm air of the north wind, the roads crammed with cars, the serious faces, all these things appeared to him as barriers standing between him and his dream. The story was not as simple as in Abqa. Here, it was without beginning, without end, without landmarks. It seemed to him that all the roads along which he walked were endless, that they circuited a rampart that held everything, every single thing within its embrace. When at sunset a road led him to the seashore and he once again saw the sea, he stood staring across at the far horizon that joined up with the water. Out there was Abqa, enveloped in tranquility. It existed. Every quarter had its beginning and its end. Every wall carried its own particular lineaments. Despite everything, it was close to his heart. He felt lost in a rush of scalding water, and for the first time he had no sense of shame as he lifted his hands to wipe salty tears from his cheeks. Muhammad Ali Akbar wept without embarrassment, perhaps for the first time since he grew up, involuntarily. He had been overcome by a ferocious yearning for the 2 water skins he used to carry across his shoulder. He was still staring out at the horizon while night gradually settled down around him. It made him feel in a way that he was present in a certain place, at a certain time, and that this night was like night in Abqa. People were sleeping behind their walls, the streets bore the lineaments of fatigue and silence, the sea rumbled heavily under the light of the moon. He felt relief. Wanting to laugh, and yet unable to, he wept once again. Dawn brought him an upsurge of fresh hope. He rose and went running through the streets. He realized that he must find someone from Amman with whom he could talk, and that he would, sooner or later, find such a person, and from there he would learn where he was destined to proceed, from where to make a start. And so Muhammad Ali Akbar attained his position as errand boy at a shop, and was provided with a bicycle on which to carry out his duties. It was from this bicycle that the features of the streets, the qualities of the walls, registered themselves in his head. He felt a certain intimacy with them, but it was an intimacy imposed upon a background of a forbidding impression that he was being dogged by the eyes of his sister Sabi'a, the chinks in the girl's window, and Muhammad Ali, the scoundrel, who unwittingly had caused such dire disaster. Months passed with the speed of a bicycle's wheels, passing over the surface of a road. The wealth he had dreamed of began to come in, and Muhammad Ali Akbar clung to his tiny fortune with all his strength, lest some passing whim should sweep it away, or some scoundrel lay his hands on it. Thus it was that it occurred to him to make a sturdy wooden box in which to keep his fortune. But what did Muhammad Ali Akbar's fortune consist of? Something that could not be reckoned in terms of money. When he had collected a certain amount of money, he had bought himself a diaphanous white abaya with gold edging. Every evening, alone with his box, he would take out the carefully folded abaya, pass his thin brown fingers tenderly over it, and spread it over his eyes. On it, he would spill out his modest dreams, tracing along its borders all the streets of the village, the low latticed windows from behind which peeped the eyes of young girls. There, in a corner of the abaya, reposed the past which he could not bring himself to return to, but whose existence was necessary in order to give the abaya its true value. The thin fingers would fold it gently once again, put it safely back in its wooden box, and tie a strong cord around it. Then, and only then, did sleep taste sweet. The box also contained a pair of china earrings for his sister Sabia, which he would give her on his return to Abha, a bottle of pungent perfume, and a white purse holding such money as God in his bounty had given him, and which he had hoped would increase day by day. As for the end, it began one evening. He was returning his bicycle to the shop when he felt a burning sensation in his limbs. He was alarmed at the thought that he had grown so weak, and with such speed, but did not take a great deal of notice, having had spells of trembling whenever he felt exceptionally homesick for Sabia and Abha. He had already experienced such a sensation of weakness, when savagely yearning for all those things he hated and loved and had left behind, those things that made up the whole of his past. And so Muhammad Ali Akbar hastened along the road to his home with these thoughts in mind. But his feeling of weakness and nostalgia stayed with him till the following midday. When he made his efforts to get up from bed, he was amazed to find that he had slept right through to noon, instead of waking up at his usual early hour. What alarmed him even more was that he was still conscious of the feeling of weakness boring into his bones. Slightly afraid, he thought for a while and imagined himself all at once standing on the seashore, with the glaring sun reflected off of the water, almost blinding him, the 2 water skins on his shoulders, conscious of a sensation of intense exhaustion. The reflection of the sun increased in violence, and yet was unable to shut his eyes. They were aflame. Abruptly, he slid back into sleep. Here, time as usually understood came to an end for Muhammad Ali Akbar. From now on, everything happened as though he was raised above the ground, as though his legs were dangling in mid-air. Like a man on a gallows, he was moving in front of time's screen, a screen as inert as a rock of basalt. His part as a practicing human had been played out. His part as a mere spectator had come. He felt that there was no bond tying him to anything, that he was somewhere far away, and that the things that moved before his eyes were no more than fish inside a large glass tumbler. His own eyes, too, were open and staring as though made of glass. When he woke up again, he realized that he was being carried by his arms and legs. Though he felt exhausted, he found the energy to recall that there was something which continued to be necessary to him, and called out in a faint voice, "The box! The box!" No one, however, paid him any attention. With a frenzied moment, he rose so as to get back to the box. His chest panting with the effort of getting to his feet, he called out, "The box! The box!" But once again, no one heard him. As he reached the door, he clung to it, and again gasped out in a lifeless voice, "The box." Overcome by his exertions, he fell into a trance that was of the seashore itself. This time, he felt that the tide was rising little by little over his feet, and that the water was intensely cold. His hands were grasping a square-shaped rock, with which he plunged downwards. When he awoke again, he found himself clasping his old box, tied around with cord, while spectres passed to and fro, and a face bent over him. Long days passed, but for Muhammad Ali Akbar, nothing really happened at all. The mercilessness of the pain continued on its way, and he was not conscious of its passing. He was conscious of its constant presence. The sea became dissolved into windows behind wooden shutters low against the side of the street, a pair of china earrings, an abaya wet with salt water, a ship suspended motionless above the waves, and an old wooden box. Only once was he aware of any contact with the world. This was when he heard a voice beside him say, "What's in the old box?" He looked at the source of the voice and saw, as in a dream, the face of a young, clean-shaven man with fair hair who was pointing at the box and looking at something. The moment of recollection was short. He returned to gazing silently at the sea, though the face of the clean-shaven, blond young man also remained in front of him. After this, he felt a sudden upsurge of energy. For no particular reason, things had become clear to him. He distinctly saw for the first time, since his collapse, the rising of the sun. It seemed to him that he was capable of getting up from his bed and returning to his bicycle. Everything had grown clear to him. The box was alongside him, bound round as it had always been. Feeling at peace, he moved so as to get up, when a crowd of men in white clothes suddenly descended upon him, standing around him and regarding him with curiosity. Muhammad Ali Akbar tried to say something but was unable to. Suddenly, he felt that the tide had risen right up to his waist, and that the water was unbearably cold. He could feel nothing. He stretched out his arms to seize hold of something, lest he should drown, but everything slid away from his fingers. Suddenly, he saw the clean-shaven face of the blond young man again. He stared at him, somewhat frightened of him, on account of his box, while the water continued to rise higher and higher until it had screened off that fair, clean-shaven face from his gaze. Bed number 12 has died. As the male nurse called out, I was unable to free myself from Muhammad Ali Akbar's eyes, staring out at me before he died. I imagined that Muhammad Ali Akbar, who refused to have his name mutilated, would not be satisfied at being merely bed number 12. If only he could be assured about the fate of his box. This, my dear Ahmad, is the story of Muhammad Ali Akbar, bed number 12, who died yesterday evening and is now lying wrapped round in a white cloth in the autopsy room. The thin brown face that shifted an ulcer from my intestines to my brain and who caused me to write to you so you don't again repeat your famous phrase, I almost died laughing in my presence. Ever yours. I haven't yet left the hospital. My health is gradually getting back to normal, and the method by which I gauge this amuses me. Do you know how I measure my strength? I stand smoking on the balcony and throw the cigarette end with all my strength so that it falls along the strips of green grass in the garden. In past weeks, the cigarette would fall just within the 4th strip, but today it was much nearer the 6th. From your letter, I understood you to say that you were in no need of being a witness to Muhammad Ali Akbar's death, to know what death is. You wrote saying that the experience of death does not require the tragic prologues with which I described Muhammad Ali Akbar's life, and that people die with far greater matter-of-factness. The man who fell down on the pavement and so let off the loaded pistol he had with him, whose bullet ripped open his neck, he was in the company of a strikingly beautiful girl, or the one who had a heart attack in the street one April evening, having been engaged to be married only a week before. Yes, that's all very true, my dear Ahmed, all very true. But the problem doesn't lie here at all. The problem of death is in no way that of the dead man. It is the problem of those who remain, those who bitterly wait their return, so that they too may serve as a humble lesson to the eaves of the living. Of all the things I wrote in my last letter, what I want to say now is that we must transfer our thinking from the starting point to the end. All thinking must set forth from the point of death, whether it be, as you say, that of a man who dies contemplating the charms of the body of a wonderfully beautiful girl, or whether he dies staring into a newly shaven face, which frightens him because of an old wooden box tied round with string. The unsolved question remains that of the end, the question of non-existence, of eternal life, or what? Or what, my dear Ahmed? Anyway, let's stop pouring water into a sack with holes in it. Do you know what happened after I sent you my last letter? I went to the doctor's room and found them writing a report about Muhammad Ali Akbar. And they were on the point of opening the box. Oh, Ahmed, how imprisoned we are in our bodies and minds. We are always endowing others with our own attributes, always looking at them through a narrow fissure of our views and ways of thinking, wanting them, as far as we can, to become us. We want to squeeze them into our skin, to give them our eyes, to see with, to clothe them in our past and our own way of facing up to life. We place them within a framework outlined by our present understanding of time and place. Muhammad Ali Akbar was none of the things I imagined. He was the father of 3 boys and 2 girls. We have forgotten that over there, men marry early. Also, Muhammad Ali Akbar was not a water seller, water being plentiful in Oman, but he had been a sailor on one of those sailing ships that ply between ports of the south and the Gulf, before settling down here quite a time ago. It was in fact 4 years ago that Muhammad Ali Akbar arrived in Kuwait. After unimaginably hard efforts, he managed, only 2 months ago, to open what passed for a shop on one of the pavements of New Street. As to how he provided for his children in Oman, we simply don't know. I read in the doctor's report that the patient had lost his sight 6 hours before death, and so it would seem that Muhammad Ali Akbar had in fact not been staring into my face at the moment of his death, as he was then blind. The doctor also wrote that as the address of the patient's family was not known, his burial would be attended solely by the hospital gravediggers. The doctor read out the report to his colleague. It was concise and extremely condensed, merely dealing in technical terms with the man's illness. The doctor's voice was gloomy and colorless. When he finished reading, he proceeded to untie the string around the box. At this point, I thought of leaving the room, for it was none of my business. The Muhammad Ali Akbar I knew had died, and this person they had written about was someone else. This box, too, was some other box. I knew for certain what Muhammad Ali Akbar's box contained. Why should I bother myself about some new problem? And yet, I was unable to go to the door, but stood in the corner, trembling slightly. The box was soon opened, and the doctor quickly ran his fingers through the contents. Then he pushed it to one side. Fearfully, I looked into the box. It was filled with recent invoices for sums owed by the shop to the stores which supplied it. In one corner was an old photo of a bearded face, an old watch strap, some string, a small candle, and several rupees among the papers. I must be truthful and say that I was sadly disappointed. Before leaving the room, though, I saw something that stunned me. The nurse had pushed aside Muhammad Ali Akbar's invoices and revealed a long china earring that glittered. In a daze, I went to the box and picked up the earrings. I don't know why it was that I looked at the nurse and said, "He bought this necklace for his sister Sabi'a. I know this for sure." For a brief instant she stared at me in some surprise. Then she laughed uproariously. The doctor, too, laughed at the joke. You are no doubt aware that nurses are required to humor patients with stomach ulcers in case that they should suffer a relapse. Yours ever.